The question cutting through the committee room atmosphere like a sword was, Mr. Trump, were you beaten in the 2020 dicey multi-election? Representative Jasmine Crockett immediately skipped waiting for camera adjustments, standard pleasantries, or procedural formalities. The moment Donald Trump took his seat in the witness stand and removed his hand from the Bible after being sworn in, she struck. She insisted on a clear yes or no answer about whether he had lost. Trump's jaw tightened in response to the directness of the questioning. Though he had been subpoenaed and compelled to show up, no one could force him to give direct answers. When he started to deflect by saying, "Well, if you look at all these, sir," Crockett's voice did not rise, but it grew firm. She demanded a yes or no answer regarding his loss in the 2020 state election. He shot back that millions of illegal votes were cast. She clarified that was not her question, bringing up fraudulent ballots and deceased voters. Mr. Trump leaned forward in his seat. She pointed out that he filed 60 lawsuits alleging fraud and lost every single one. He failed before judges he personally appointed. His own attorney general described his claims directly as complete garbage. A soft murmur spread through the audience gallery. Trump's face flushed red at the mention of Bill Barr being perceived as weak. She reminded him that Bill Barr was his attorney general, whom he had hired and trusted, until Barr told him the truth. She paused briefly to let that statement resonate. So she asked him again for the third time under oath if he lost the 2020 CC election. The resulting silence stretched on. Trump adjusted his position in his seat while every camera focus remained locked on him. Somewhere within the gallery, Officer Michael Fanone, still bearing scars from being beaten by a mob on January 6th, watched unblinkingly. Trump opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it once more. He stated that the American people knew what occurred. Crockett retorted that she was not asking the American people, she was asking him. Crockett picked up a document stating Joseph Biden received 81,283,501 votes, while he received 74,223,975 votes. That indicated a difference of 7 million votes. Biden secured 306 electoral votes compared to his 232. Back in 2016, when he won by 306 electoral votes, he termed it a massive landslide victory. She looked up from the paper to confirm that by his own definition, Biden won in a massive landslide. Trump's legal counsel leaned over and whispered something that Trump waved away. He accused her of twisting his words. She countered that she was using his own words from tweets and speeches. He said 306 was a landslide when he won, and Biden won by the same margin. Therefore, either he won in a landslide in 2016 and Biden did in 2020, or he was lying about one of them. She set the paper down and asked which scenario it was. The room collectively held its breath, waiting for a response. This event was not going to be another congressional hearing where witnesses filibustered until time expired. Jasmine Crockett held no interest in speeches. She was a former prosecutor who arrived armed with items Donald Trump could not defeat. She brought facts, a timeline, and evidence, leaving nowhere to run. Quietly, she reminded Mr. Trump that he was under oath. He could not tweet his escape from that room. He could not walk out. He could not label this a witch hunt and expect the question to disappear. Leaning back in her chair, she stated firmly that he lost. His own campaign manager told him that he lost. His own data showed him that he lost. His own daughter accepted that he lost. 60 courts, including judges he appointed, ruled that he lost. Every person in America knows he lost. The weight of those words settled over the room. The only question bearing significance now is what actions he took after he lost. What did he do when he could not accept reality? She asked what he did on January 6th while opening the first folder. She noted that was what they were there to discuss. Trump finally spoke, with his voice carrying that familiar defiant edge. He claimed he possessed every right to challenge the election results. That is what any candidate would do. She agreed he had the right to challenge them legally. He did so 60 times and lost 60 times. Crockett pulled out another document to discuss what his people told him. not the media nor Democrats, but his own team. She began reading a statement from his Attorney General Bill Barr on December 1st, 2020. We realized right from the beginning it was just complete garbage. On December 14th of the same month, there was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were. Trump attempted to interrupt, but Crockett did not let him. His campaign manager, Bill Stepien, told him the numbers did not add up. His data experts told him there was no path to victory. His own daughter, Ivanka Trump, testified under oath that she accepted Bill Barr's assessment that there was no fraud. She looked up and noted his daughter believed the Attorney General. She asked why he did not. Ivanka was not seeing all the evidence. Crockett's voice sharpened while asking what evidence. The evidence Sidney Powell promised but never produced. The evidence Rudy Giuliani claimed to have but could not show in court. The kraken that never materialized. She stood now, walking to a display board where a list had been prepared. Let's review your legal record, Mr. Trump. Arizona saw 10 cases filed and 10 cases lost. Georgia saw 8 cases filed and 8 cases lost. Michigan had 7 cases filed and 7 cases lost. Pennsylvania had 20 cases filed and 20 cases lost. Wisconsin had 3 cases filed and 3 cases lost. Her finger moved down the list through Nevada, New Mexico, and Minnesota, noting loss after loss after loss. She turned back to him to note these were not just any judges, these were judges from across the political spectrum. Conservative judges and judges he appointed said the same thing. They all said there was no evidence. Trump leaned forward, claiming the courts did not want to hear. She insisted they heard his cases, Mr. Trump. They examined his evidence, or rather his lack of evidence. In Pennsylvania, Judge Stephanos Bibas, appointed by him, wrote his claims were like Frankenstein's monster, haphazardly stitched together. In Wisconsin, his own lawyers admitted in court they were not alleging fraud. In Arizona, even the Republican-led audit found Biden won. The gallery remained silent as Crockett let the facts pile up like evidence at a crime scene. Regarding his claims of dead people voting, his legal team could not prove it. Dominion voting machines switching votes was debunked. Suitcases of ballots were debunked. Video evidence of fraud was debunked by his own cybersecurity officials, who called 2020 the most secure election in American history. She moved closer to the witness stand to summarize what is known for certain. He was told by everyone around him that he lost. He filed 60 lawsuits and lost every single one. He had 2 months and unlimited resources to prove fraud. He found nothing because there was nothing to find. Trump's hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. He asked if she had seen what he saw. She asked what he saw that 60 courts did not see. What did he see that his own Attorney General did not see? What did he see that his own cybersecurity experts did not see? Crockett paused to ask if it was possible he did not see anything but just could not accept losing. She returned to her seat and organized her next folder. Let me ask you something, Mr. Trump. In 2016, when you won Michigan by 10,000 votes, was that legitimate? Of course it was. And in 2020, when you lost Michigan by 154,000 votes, that was fraud? He claimed there were irregularities. In 2016, when you won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes, that was legitimate? Yes, it was. But in 2020, when you lost Pennsylvania by 81,000 votes, that was fraud? Trump tried to speak, but Crockett pressed on. In 2016, you won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes, and it was legitimate. In 2020, you lost Wisconsin by 21,000 votes, and it was fraud. She paused to ask if he saw the pattern. Every state he won was legitimate. Every state he lost was fraud. That's not an election challenge. That's narcissism. A few gasps came from the gallery. Trump's face darkened. He claimed she had no right. She retorted she had every right. This is a congressional hearing, and he is under oath. She leaned forward to be crystal clear. You lost the 2020 election. You knew you lost. Everyone around you told you that you lost. And what happened next? Everything that happened on January 6th started with this lie. She opened the next folder. Because when you could not win in court, you tried something else. You tried to overturn the election through a scheme, a conspiracy. Let's talk about that conspiracy. Trump's lawyer stood saying, "Congresswoman, my client," she stated, "his client will answer questions. That's why he is here." She did not break eye contact with Trump. You met with an attorney named John Eastman multiple times in December 2020 and January 2021, didn't you? Trump shifted uncomfortably. He said he met with many lawyers about his legal options. She retorted John Eastman was not advising him on legal options. He was providing him with a blueprint to overturn the election. Crockett held up a document. This is the Eastman memo. 2 pages that outlined exactly how Vice President Pence could reject electoral votes from states he lost. As she began reading, Step 1, Pence declares that 7 states have competing electors. Step 2, Pence refuses to count those electoral votes. Step 3, with those votes removed, neither candidate has 270 electoral votes. Step 4, the election goes to the House where Republicans have more state delegations. She looked up saying, Step 5, you win. The room buzzed with murmurs. Crockett continued, stating, "This was not legal advice, Mr. Trump. This was a coup memo, and even John Eastman knew it." When asked if this plan would withstand Supreme Court review, do you know what he said? She read from testimony that it would lose 9-0, his own plan, and he admitted it was unconstitutional. Trump tried to defend it as just exploring options. No, sir. Exploring options is asking lawyers what the law allows. This was asking lawyers to help you break the law. She pulled out more documents. And when every reputable lawyer told you it would not work, you went lawyer shopping. You found John Eastman, who was willing to try, but even your White House counsel thought it was insane. She read from Pat Cipollone's testimony. I thought the Eastman theory was completely crazy. And Eric Hirschman told Eastman, and I quote, "You're going to cause riots in the streets." The phrase hung in the air, riots in the streets. Your own lawyers warned you this would cause violence, and you pursued it anyway. Crockett set down the document, noting the Eastman memo was not his only scheme. You needed fake electors to make it work. Let's talk about that. She displayed images on the screen behind her. These are fake electoral certificates from 7 states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. States Joe Biden won, but your campaign organized fake electors to sign fake certificates claiming you won. The images showed official-looking documents with signatures and seals. In Arizona, 11 fake electors signed. In Georgia, 16 fake electors signed. In Michigan, 16 more. All told, 84 people signed fake electoral certificates at your campaign's direction. She turned back to Trump. This was not confusion. This was not a mistake. This was organized fraud. Trump protested they were alternate electors in case. In case what? In case the courts overturned the election. They didn't. In case audits found fraud. They didn't. These were not alternate electors. They were fake electors submitting fraudulent documents to Congress. She pulled out an email stating Rudy Giuliani coordinated this. Your campaign lawyers organized it. They knew exactly what they were doing. She read from the email. We just need to have someone send in the votes, not official votes, not certified votes, just the votes. Because they knew these were not legitimate. Crockett looked up. In Michigan, the fake electors had to sneak into the state capitol because they were not authorized to be there. They signed documents in secret and submitted them anyway. That's not an alternative. That's forgery. She moved to the next section. And all of this, the Eastman memo, the fake electors, it all depended on one person, Mike Pence, your vice president. So you spent weeks pressuring him to go along with it. Trump's expression hardened at Pence's name. You called him repeatedly. You had Eastman meet with him. You publicly attacked him on Twitter when he would not comply. She pulled out a timeline. December 23rd, you tweeted that the election was rigged. December 27th, you called Pence. December 29th, Eastman met with Pence's legal counsel. January 1st, you called Pence again. January 3rd, another call. January 4th, another call. She looked at Trump. You were relentless. And every time Pence told you the same thing, he didn't have the authority. The Constitution didn't give him that power. He couldn't do what you wanted. Mike could have. No, he couldn't. And you knew he couldn't. Every constitutional scholar told you he couldn't. His own legal counsel told you he couldn't. The Constitution itself says the vice president's role is ministerial. He counts the votes. He doesn't decide which votes count. Crockett's voice strengthened. But you didn't care about the Constitution. You cared about staying in power. So you kept pushing. And when Mike Pence still refused, you did something unforgivable. She paused, letting the transition land. On the morning of January 6th, before your rally, you called him one final time. You tried to bully him into betraying his constitutional oath. And when he said no, when he told you he was going to do his duty, you made him the villain. She pulled up a tweet displayed on the screen. At 1 a.m. on January 6th, you tweeted, "If Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. Not if Mike Pence follows the Constitution, not if Mike Pence upholds the law." The right thing meant breaking his oath. Trump shifted, saying he was just pointing out. Crockett's voice cut through. You were pointing a target at him. And a few hours later, you'd send a mob to hunt him. She closed the folder. So let's review. You lost the election. You knew you lost. You tried to pressure your vice president into overturning it illegally. You organized fake electors in 7 states. You pursued a conspiracy that your own lawyers said would cause riots. She leaned forward. And then, Mr. Trump, you gave a speech. Let's talk about what you said. Crockett pulled out a transcript. The pages were marked with highlighted sections, tabs sticking out from multiple pages. January 6, 2021, you held a rally at the Ellipse near the White House. You spoke for approximately 70 minutes, and you told a crowd of thousands exactly what you wanted them to do. She began reading. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. She looked up. You said fight or fighting 20 times in that speech. 20 times. Trump tried to interject that it was just a figure of speech. Crockett flipped through the transcript reading, We fight and we fight like hell. You have to show strength. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to be strong. She set the pages down. You also said the word peacefully exactly once. Once, Mr. Trump. She let that sink in. 1 call for peace, 20 calls to fight. Those are not the words of someone trying to prevent violence. Those are the words of someone inciting it. Trump's lawyer stood, saying political speech often uses. Sit down, Crockett interrupted without looking at the lawyer. Mr. Trump, you also said something else in that speech. You said we're going to walk down to the Capitol. She emphasized each word. You told them where to go. She pulled up another section. We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. She looked at Trump, asking who he meant by the ones not being cheered for. Did you mean the ones who were going to certify the election? The ones who wouldn't help you overturn it? Trump said nothing. You sent them to the Capitol with a mission, stop the certification. And you told them Mike Pence was the enemy if he didn't comply. She read again. I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. She closed the transcript. You set him up. You made him the villain. And then you sent an angry mob to where he was working. Crockett pulled out another document. But here's what you didn't tell that crowd. You didn't tell them you knew many of them were armed. You didn't tell them you wanted the metal detectors removed so the crowd would look bigger. You didn't tell them you didn't care about their weapons because they weren't there to hurt you. Trump's face reddened as he claimed he never said that. Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath that you did. Crockett read from the testimony. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't fucking care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the fucking mags away, let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. The room went silent. Your people, Crockett repeated, were armed, and you wanted to let them in anyway because they weren't there to hurt you. She paused. But you were sending them to the Capitol, where Congress was, where Mike Pence was, where police officers were. She set the testimony down. So let me ask you directly. Did you know people in that crowd had weapons? Trump hesitated, saying there were rumors. Not rumors, reports. Your Secret Service told you. Your staff told you. You knew, she pressed harder. And did you want the metal detectors removed so armed people could join your rally? Yes or no? Trump's jaw worked. He did not answer. Your silence tells us everything. Crockett opened the next folder. At approximately 1:10 p.m., your speech ended. You told the crowd you'd walk with them to the Capitol. I'll be there with you, you said. But you didn't go to the Capitol, did you? The Secret Service didn't want you to go because it wasn't safe. Because you just sent an angry armed mob there. She leaned forward. So instead, you went back to the White House. You went to the dining room and you turned on the television. She paused, letting the transition settle. And for the next 187 minutes, you watched. Let's talk about what you watched. And more importantly, what you didn't do. Crockett stood and walked to a large display showing a timeline. 1:10 p.m., you return to the White House. Your speech is over. The crowd is heading to the Capitol. You're watching Fox News. She pointed to the first marker on the timeline. What happened next, Mr. Trump, is documented minute by minute. And every minute matters. Her finger moved down the timeline. 1:50 p.m., first barriers breached. Capitol Police are being overwhelmed. You're watching it on television. Trump tried to speak, but Crockett held up a hand. 2:12 p.m., rioters breached the Capitol itself. They're smashing windows. They're breaking down doors. Police are calling for backup. She turned to face him. You're still watching television. She clicked a remote. Video footage appeared on the screen behind her. The gallery gasped. Many had tried to forget these images. This is what you saw, Mr. Trump. This is what was being broadcast live. The video showed rioters overwhelming police lines, smashing the windows, flooding into the Capitol. Watch it again. Watch what you watched. The footage played for 30 seconds. Violence, chaos, officers being beaten. Crockett stopped the video. 2:24 p.m., 12 minutes after the Capitol is breached, and you finally send a message. Do you remember what you said? She pulled up a tweet on the screen. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. She turned to Trump, her voice hard as steel. At that exact moment, Mike Pence was being evacuated. Secret Service was rushing him out of the Senate chamber. They thought he might be killed, and you tweeted blame at him. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Crockett raised her voice over them. Were you trying to get him killed? He said that was ridiculous. Is it ridiculous? You told the mob he betrayed them. You told them where he was. You knew they were armed. You knew they were violent. You watched them attack police officers, and then you threw gasoline on the fire by attacking Pence while he was being hunted. Trump's lawyer stood again, claiming she was putting words in his mouth. I'm reading his actual tweet, posted at 2:24 p.m. on January 6th, while the Vice President of the United States was fleeing for his life. She turned back to Trump. In the 187 minutes between when you returned to the White House and when you finally told the mob to go home, you sent one tweet. One. And it was an attack on Mike Pence. She moved back to the timeline. Let's continue. 2:30 p.m., the violence escalates. Officer Michael Fanone is pulled into the crowd. Crockett gestured to the gallery. Officer Fanone is here today. Would you stand, please? A man in his 40s stood. His face bore visible scars. The room turned to look at him. Officer Fanone, what happened to you on January 6th? Fanone's voice was steady but heavy. I was dragged into the crowd. They beat me with their fists, with flagpoles, with American flags, with anything they could grab. Someone tased me repeatedly in the neck. I had a heart attack. I thought I was going to die. Crockett turned back to Trump. Officer Fanone nearly died while you watched television. What did you do to stop it? Trump looked away, saying he was not aware. It was on every channel. Fox News was showing it live. You were watching. Her voice rose. What did you do? He claimed he was monitoring the situation. Monitoring? Crockett's voice cracked like a whip. Officer Fanone was having a heart attack and you were monitoring. She pointed to the next marker. Let's move on. 2:44 p.m. Officer Daniel Hodges is crushed in a doorway. Rioters try to gouge his eyes out. He's screaming for help. She turned to the gallery. Officer Hodges, are you here? Another man stood, younger, also bearing scars. What happened to you? Hodges' voice was quiet. I was pinned in a doorframe. They crushed me. I couldn't breathe. Someone tried to take my gun. Siam, he paused. I thought I was going to die there. Crockett looked at Trump. Officer Hodges nearly died. What did you do? Silence. Nothing. She moved to the next marker. 2:44 p.m., same moment. Ashley Babbitt is shot trying to breach the Speaker's lobby. She's one of your supporters, Mr. Trump. She believed your lies about the election. She came to the Capitol because you told her to fight. And she died. Crockett's voice softened, but only slightly. Did you feel any responsibility when you heard she'd been killed? Trump finally spoke. She was a patriot. She was lied to by you. You told her the election was stolen. You told her to fight. You sent her to the Capitol and she died believing your lies. Crockett's voice rose again. That blood is on your hands. She returned to the timeline. Meanwhile, where was the National Guard? The Capitol Police were begging for help. The Pentagon was ready to deploy. All they needed was your authorization. She turned to Trump. You're the president. You command the military. You command the National Guard. Why didn't you send them? He tried to blame Nancy Pelosi. That's a lie, Crockett cut him off. The Speaker of the House does not command the National Guard. You do. That's the Constitution, Article 2. You're lying about the chain of command under oath. Trump's face reddened. He mentioned the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense was waiting for your order. An order you didn't give for 187 minutes. She moved closer to the witness stand. Let me tell you who else was calling you. Kevin McCarthy called you, begged you to call off the mob. Your own daughter, Ivanka, begged you. Sean Hannity texted your chief of staff begging for you to do something. Republican senators called. Your own family called. She listed them one by one. Everyone was begging you to stop it. And what did you do? Trump said nothing. You watched. Pat Cipollone testified that you seemed excited. She checked her notes to confirm the word excited. People were dying and you were excited. The word hung in the air like an accusation. 3:13 p.m., rioters reached the Senate floor. They're sitting in the vice president's chair. They're rifling through senators' desks. They're hunting for members of Congress. She played more footage. Rioters chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Rioters with zip ties. Rioters smashing property. This is what you watched, Mr. Trump, for 3 hours. She moved to the final marker. 4:17 p.m. Finally, you release a video. But let's watch what you said. She played the video. Trump on camera. I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us, but you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We love you. You're very special. Crockett stopped the video. We love you. You're very special. You didn't condemn them. You didn't call them criminals. You told them you loved them. She faced him directly. 5 people died that day or in the immediate aftermath. Officer Brian Sicknick collapsed after the riot and died the next day. Officer Howard Liebengood died by suicide 3 days later. Officer Jeffrey Smith died by suicide days after that from trauma he sustained on January 6th. Ashley Babbitt shot trying to breach the chamber. Roseanne Boyland crushed by the mob. She paused. 140 officers were injured. Some have traumatic brain injuries. Some have PTSD so severe they can't work anymore. Some wake up screaming. Crockett walked closer to Trump. And you did nothing for 187 minutes. You had the power to stop it with one phone call, one tweet, one command. But you chose not to. She let the silence stretch. Why? Trump opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He said he believed they would listen to him. They did listen to you. You told them to fight, and they fought. You told them to march to the Capitol, and they marched. You told them Pence betrayed them, and they hunted him. She leaned forward. They did exactly what you told them to do. And when they did, you loved them for it. She straightened. But it didn't end there, did it? Let's talk about what you've said since then. Crockett opened the final folder. In the days, weeks, months, and years after January 6th, you've had countless opportunities to express remorse, to condemn the violence, to take responsibility. She pulled out a series of statements. Instead, you called the rioters patriots. You said they were hugging and kissing the police. You claimed Ashley Babbitt was murdered by law enforcement. You've promised to pardon January 6th defendants if you're elected again. She looked up. Is that true? Will you pardon them? Trump shifted, saying many of them were treated unfairly. People who beat police officers, people who smashed windows, people who threatened to hang the vice president. Are these the people you want to pardon? He claimed they were exercising their First Amendment rights. The First Amendment doesn't protect insurrection, Crockett's voice thundered through the chamber. It doesn't protect assault. It doesn't protect trying to overthrow the government. She took a breath, steadied herself. Mr. Trump, let me read you something from a federal judge sentencing a January 6th defendant. She read slowly. You took it upon yourself, with others, to ignore the rule of law, to push past police officers trying to do their job. You did so because you bought into a lie that the election was stolen, but it wasn't stolen. And your actions that day were not patriotism, they were the opposite. Crockett set the page down. That's what a federal judge said. Not a Democratic operative. Not a media pundit. A federal judge. And there are hundreds of these cases. Hundreds of convictions. Hundreds of defendants who believed your lies and are now in prison. She pulled up statistics on the screen. Over 1,000 people arrested. Hundreds convicted. Charges ranging from trespassing to seditious conspiracy. And you want to pardon them? Trump tried to respond that some of them just walked through the Capitol. Some of them attacked police. Some of them planned to kidnap members of Congress. Some of them built a gallows and chanted about hanging the vice president. Her voice rose with each statement. These are not tourists. They're criminals. And you made them criminals by lying to them. She moved closer. You told them the election was stolen. You told them to fight. You sent them to the Capitol. You watched them commit violence. You did nothing to stop it. And now you want to pardon them and call them heroes. She paused. That tells us everything we need to know about whether you understand the gravity of what happened. You don't. Or worse, you do and you don't care. Crockett returned to her seat. Let me ask you one final question, Mr. Trump, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. She looked at Officer Fanone in the gallery, at Officer Hodges, at the family members of officers who did not survive, at the survivors sitting with visible and invisible scars. If you could go back to January 6th, knowing what happened, the violence, the deaths, the trauma, would you do anything differently? The room held its breath. Trump straightened. He began to say he believed the election integrity issues needed to be addressed. She interrupted. That's not what I asked. Would you do anything differently, yes or no? Trump's jaw set. I stand by everything I did. The words landed like a bomb. Crockett nodded slowly. You stand by it. All of it. The lies about the election. The pressure on Pence. The rally speech sending the mob. Watching them attack police. Doing nothing for 187 minutes. The tweet attacking Pence while he fled. All of it. He claimed he was fighting for something. You were fighting to stay in power, and you were willing to burn down democracy to do it. She stood. Mr. Trump, I have one more question. She walked to stand directly in front of the witness chair. 5 people died on January 6th or in the immediate aftermath. 140 officers were injured. The Capitol was breached for the first time since 1814. The peaceful transfer of power, the cornerstone of American democracy, was threatened. All because you couldn't accept that you lost. She paused. Was it worth it? Trump stared at her. The cameras captured every micro-expression. The entire room waited. Was your ego, your inability to admit defeat, worth Officer Sicknick's life? Worth Officer Smith's life? Worth the years of trauma that Officer Fanone carries? Worth the injury to Officer Hodges? She gestured to the gallery. Look at them. Look at the people who defended the Capitol while you watched TV. Look at them and tell them it was worth it. Trump's eyes flickered to the gallery, then away. You can't look at them because you know the answer. Crockett's voice dropped, became almost quiet, but the quiet was more powerful than shouting. It wasn't worth it. None of it was worth it. She walked back to her desk. But you'd do it again, wouldn't you? Because you can't help yourself. You can't admit you lost. You can't accept accountability. You can't put your country above your ego. She picked up one final document. Let me read you something, Mr. Trump. These are the words of the oath you took on January 20th, 2017. She read slowly, clearly. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. She set the paper down. Preserve, protect, defend. Her voice rose. On January 6, 2021, you did none of those things. You didn't preserve the Constitution. You tried to subvert it with fake electors and an illegal scheme. You didn't protect the Capitol. You sent a mob to attack it. You didn't defend democracy. You tried to overturn an election. She counted on her fingers. You lied about election fraud. You organized a conspiracy. You pressured your vice president to break the law. You incited a mob. You sent them armed to the Capitol. You watched them attack for 187 minutes. And you did nothing. Her voice strengthened with each point. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't. Because stopping them would mean admitting you lost, and your pride was more important than their safety. She looked directly at Trump. You are the only president in American history who refused to peacefully transfer power. You are the only president who incited an attack on the Capitol. You are the only president who watched Americans die to defend democracy while you did nothing. The room was completely silent. That's not patriotism. That's not leadership. That's not courage, she paused. That's betrayal. Crockett gestured to the gallery one more time. Officer Fanone nearly died defending the Capitol you sent a mob to attack. Officer Hodges was crushed in a doorway. Officer Sicknick died. Officer Smith died. Officer Liebengood died. Ashley Babbitt died. Roseanne Boylan died. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. They're dead, Mr. Trump. And you told the survivors you love them. You called them patriots. You want to pardon them. She shook her head. The only people who deserve to be called patriots are the ones who defended the Capitol that day. The police officers who held the line. The members of Congress who came back to certify the election despite the attack. The election workers who did their jobs despite your threats. The vice president who upheld his constitutional duty despite your mob hunting him. She pointed at Trump. You, sir, are not a patriot. You're the threat they defended against. Crockett gathered her papers. This committee has heard enough. We've heard your deflections, your lies, your refusal to take responsibility. We've seen the evidence. We've heard from witnesses. We've watched the videos. We know what happened. And more importantly, we know what you didn't do. She looked at her fellow committee members. I move that this committee refers Donald J. Trump to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution on the following charges: conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, seditious conspiracy, and incitement to insurrection. The room erupted. Half the gallery stood in applause. The other half shouted in protest. Cameras flashed. Trump's lawyer was on his feet objecting. The chairman banged the gavel repeatedly. Through it all, Crockett stood calmly, her eyes never leaving Trump. When the room finally settled, the chairman called for a vote. All in favor? Aye, came the voices of the Democratic members. All opposed? No. The Republican members voted no, except for two who sat silent, unable to bring themselves to vote either way after everything they'd heard. The motion passes. Mr. Trump, this committee hereby refers you to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck. Trump stood, his face red, and walked toward the exit. He passed Officer Fanone in the gallery. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Fanone didn't look away. Trump did. The gavel's echo had barely faded when Trump rose from the witness chair. No final statement, no defiant speech for the cameras waiting outside. For perhaps the first time in his political life, he had nothing left to say. His lawyers flanked him as he moved toward the exit, but their usual swagger was gone. They'd witnessed something unprecedented. Their client cornered by facts, unable to spin his way free. One of them had been taking notes throughout the hearing. Now those notes hung loosely in his hand, pages covered in crossed-out deflections that hadn't worked. As Trump approached the gallery exit, he had to pass through a narrow aisle. On one side sat Officer Michael Fanone, still in the same seat he'd occupied for 8 hours. Fanone didn't move, didn't stand aside, didn't make it easy. Their eyes met. In that moment, everything hung suspended. The man who'd sent the mob and the man who'd nearly died stopping it face to face, 3 feet apart. Trump's step faltered, just for a second, just long enough for every camera in the room to capture it. Fanone held his gaze. The scars on his neck from where he'd been tased repeatedly were visible. His jaw was set. His eyes held no anger now, just something harder to dismiss: disappointment. The look of someone who'd believed in institutions, in oaths, in the office of the presidency, and had watched all of it betrayed. Trump looked away first, pushed past, kept walking. Officer Hodges, sitting beside Fanone, watched him go. He couldn't even look at us, he said quietly. No, Fanone replied. He couldn't. Eugene Goodman, in the row behind them, stood. He'd remained silent throughout the hearing, his presence alone speaking volumes. Now he placed a hand on Fanone's shoulder. No words were needed. They'd been through something together that no one else could fully understand. Behind them, Cassidy Hutchinson sat with her hands folded, processing what she'd just witnessed. She'd testified before the January 6th committee. She'd told the truth despite threats to her career, her safety, her life. But this, watching Trump forced to answer, forced to face the people he'd hurt, felt different, final somehow. Thank you, a voice said beside her. Hutchinson turned. It was Sandra Garza, Officer Brian Sicknick's longtime partner. She'd been in the gallery, too, representing the officer who couldn't be there himself. For what? Hutchinson asked. For speaking up when it mattered. For making this possible. Sandra's eyes were red but dry. She'd cried all her tears long ago. Brian would have wanted him to answer for it. You helped make that happen. Hutchinson squeezed her hand, no words sufficient. Outside, the Capitol steps were chaos. News crews from every major network had staked out positions. Satellite trucks lined the street. Reporters practiced their opening lines trying to find the right words to capture what had just occurred. The biggest political confrontation in modern American history, and they'd all witnessed it. Trump emerged first, surrounded by Secret Service and staff. They'd planned a press conference, prepared statements about witch hunts and political persecution. But as Trump faced the wall of cameras, something stopped him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the weight of 8 hours under oath, unable to escape the truth. Maybe it was seeing Officer Fanone's scars up close. "No comment," he said and got into his vehicle. The press erupted and shouted questions, but the SUV was already moving, pulling away from the Capitol for what many suspected might be the last time. One reporter turned to her camera. In a stunning turn of events, Donald Trump, never at a loss for words, just left without a statement. No defiance, no claims of victory, just silence. Minutes later, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett emerged. She'd taken a moment inside to gather herself. After 8 hours of prosecution, of maintaining control, of not letting him deflect or escape, 8 hours of representing not just her constituents, but every American who'd watched January 6th and wondered if anyone would ever be held accountable. Now, as she stepped into the late afternoon sun, the exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But the cameras were waiting, the American people were waiting. She straightened her jacket and walked to the microphones. "Congresswoman Crockett, do you think he'll be prosecuted? Will this change anything? Was it worth it?" That last question, an echo of her own words to Trump, made her pause. "But the American people deserve accountability," she began, her voice steady. "That's what today was about. For 3 years, we've watched the investigation unfold. We've seen the evidence. We've heard the testimony. But we've never seen Donald Trump forced to answer direct questions under oath about his actions on January 6th. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Today we presented the evidence. We asked the questions no one else would ask. We made him face or try to face what he did and what he didn't do." "But will it lead to prosecution?" a reporter pressed. "That's not my decision, that's for the Department of Justice. But I will say this, we followed the evidence. We documented every deflection, every non-answer, every moment he couldn't look the officers in the eye. The committee has voted to make a criminal referral. The rest is up to prosecutors and ultimately juries. Some are calling this political theater." Crockett's expression hardened. "Theater? Officer Fanone's scars aren't theater. Officer Sicknick's death wasn't theater. The 187 minutes that Donald Trump watched police officers being beaten while he did nothing wasn't theater. That was dereliction of duty. That was betrayal. And making him answer for it under oath isn't political, it's accountability." Her voice rose slightly. "For 3 years, we've heard excuses. We've heard deflections. We've heard him call the rioters patriots and promise to pardon them. Today, for the first time, he had to answer under oath. No Twitter to hide behind, no rally crowd to energize him. Just him, the evidence, and the truth. Do you think it will change minds?" She took a breath. "I think the truth always makes a difference. Maybe not immediately, maybe not for everyone. But truth has a weight to it. It accumulates and eventually it becomes impossible to ignore." She gestured back toward the Capitol. "This building has stood for over 200 years. It survived wars, it survived attacks, it survived attempts to tear it down. It survived January 6th because of people like Officer Fanone, Officer Hodges, Eugene Goodman. People who held the line when our democracy was under attack." Her voice strengthened. "Democracy doesn't survive in silence. It survives when people remember, when people bear witness, when people refuse to let the truth be buried under lies. That's what today was about, making sure America remembers, making sure the truth stays on the record." Behind her, the officers emerged together, Fanone, Hodges, Goodman, men who'd become symbols of courage and sacrifice, though they'd never sought that role. The reporters immediately shifted attention. Officer Fanone, your reaction to the hearing? Fanone stepped to the microphones. His voice was steady, but emotion flickered in his eyes that had seen too much. I want to thank Congresswoman Crockett, he began. For 3 years, we've waited. Waited for someone to ask him the questions that needed asking. Waited for someone to make him answer for what he did and what he didn't do. He paused, collecting himself. Today he had to face us. He had to sit in that chair and hear about the officers who were beaten, who were crushed, who died. He had to hear about the 187 minutes that he watched it happen and did nothing. His voice cracked slightly. I was pulled into that crowd. They beat me with their fist, with flagpoles, with anything they could grab. Someone tased me in my neck until I had a heart attack. I thought I was going to die on those steps. He looked directly into the cameras. And while that was happening, while I was begging for my life, he was watching TV. He was eating lunch. He was doing nothing because helping us would mean admitting he lost. And his pride was more important than our lives. Officer Hodges stepped up beside him. Some of us still have nightmares. Some of us can't go back to work. Some of us lost brothers who couldn't live with what happened that day. His jaw tightened. Officer Jeffrey Smith, Officer Howard Liebengood. They survived the attack, but they couldn't survive the aftermath. He looked at the Capitol behind them. We defended this building. We defended the Constitution. We defended democracy. We did our jobs. He didn't do his. And today, finally, someone made him answer for it. Eugene Goodman, who'd remained largely silent since his actions on January 6th made him a hero, stepped forward. The cameras focused on him with particular intensity. This was the man whose split-second decisions had saved lives. I took an oath, he said simply. His voice was quiet but carried complete authority. So did he. I swore to support and defend the Constitution. So did he. The difference is, I kept mine. He paused. On January 6th, I had a choice. I could run to safety, or I could lead the mob away from the Senate chamber. I chose to protect the institution I'd sworn to defend. He had a choice, too. For 187 minutes, he could have called them off. He could have sent the National Guard. He could have done his constitutional duty. He chose not to. Goodman looked directly into the camera. Today wasn't about politics. Today was about accountability. About whether anyone, even a former president, is above answering for their actions. Congresswoman Crockett proved they're not. He stepped back, and the three officers stood together, men from different backgrounds, different ages, different parts of the country, united by one terrible day when they'd held the line while their commander-in-chief abandoned them. A reporter called out asking if they thought Trump felt any remorse. Fanone almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. He couldn't even look at us when he walked past me in that hearing room. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds, and he looked away. That tells you everything. He said he'd do it all again, Hodges added. That's not remorse. That's not accountability. That's someone who still doesn't understand or doesn't care about the damage he caused. But maybe others will care, Fanone said. Maybe seeing him unable to answer those questions will matter to someone. Maybe one person who believed his lies will see through them now. And maybe that's enough. Inside the Capitol, in a small office away from the cameras, Sandra Garza sat with Cassidy Hutchinson. Between them on the table was a photo of Officer Brian Sicknick in uniform, smiling before January 6th changed everything. I wish Brian could have been here to see it, Sandra said softly. He was here, Hutchinson replied. Everyone who defended the Capitol that day was here. That's why it mattered so much, Sandra nodded, asking if she thought the criminal referral would lead anywhere. Hutchinson considered. I don't know, she said, but I know the truth is on the record now. Under oath. Documented. Every deflection, every non-answer, every lie he told can't be erased. Can't be spun away. It's there. She looked at Brian's photo. Your Brian didn't die for nothing. None of them did. Because people are still fighting for the truth. Still fighting for accountability. Still fighting for the democracy they defended. Sandra wiped her eyes, hoping she was right. I have to be right, Hutchinson said. We all do. Because the alternative, that it all meant nothing, that he gets away with it again, isn't acceptable. We can't let it be acceptable. As evening fell over Washington, the hearing dominated every news channel. CNN played the exchange, asking if it was worth it on repeat. MSNBC brought on constitutional scholars to discuss the implications of the criminal referral. Fox News argued about whether the hearing was legitimate, but even they couldn't avoid showing the key moments. Trump unable to answer, unable to look at the officers, unable to justify the 187 minutes of inaction. On social media, clips went viral. The moment Trump looked away from Officer Fanone, the moment Crockett listed the names of everyone who died, the moment Goodman said, I kept my oath. By midnight, tashed to January 6th, hearing was trending worldwide. The full transcript had been downloaded over 1 million times. Legal analysts were parsing every word, looking for statements that could be used in potential prosecutions. In living rooms across America, families who'd been divided by January 6th found themselves talking again. Not all agreed. Some thought the hearing was necessary, others thought it was persecution. But everyone was talking, everyone was watching. Everyone had to confront what had happened on that day. A retired teacher in Ohio watched the replay with her Trump-supporting husband. When Crockett asked if it was worth it, the wife turned to her husband and asked the same question. He didn't answer, but later that night she found him watching videos of January 6th that he'd avoided for 3 years. Sometimes questions matter more than answers. A college student in Texas called her father a police officer after watching Officer Fanone testify. Is that what it's really like? She asked. When people betray the oath? Her father was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, he said. But most of us keep our word, and that's what matters. A veteran in Oregon who'd been torn about January 6th watched Eugene Goodman speak about oaths and duty. He looked at his own discharge papers on the wall, his oath of enlistment framed beside them. Some oaths, he remembered, were supposed to mean something. Not everyone changed their minds, not everyone was moved, but everyone had to witness, had to see, had to reckon with what happened in that hearing room, and that in the end was the point. Late that night, after the cameras were gone and the Capitol was quiet, Officer Fanone stood alone on the steps where he'd nearly died 3 years earlier. The scars on his neck ached. They always did when he came back here. But he came back anyway. Because forgetting would dishonor what happened, would dishonor the officers who didn't make it, would let the lies win. Footsteps approached behind him, and he turned to see Congresswoman Crockett, also working late. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Never can after coming here. He gestured at the steps. This is where they pulled me in. Right here. They stood in silence for a moment. Did it help? Crockett asked. Today? Did it help at all? Fanone thought about it honestly. I don't know. Maybe. I got to look him in the eye and watch him look away. I got to hear him admit or fail to deny that he did nothing while we fought for our lives. That's something. But he's not sorry. He'd do it again. He said so. Fanone's voice was tired. So did it change anything? Maybe not for him, but maybe for someone watching. Maybe one person who believed his lies will think twice now. And maybe that person won't storm a building next time someone tells them to. He looked at Crockett. Thank you for doing what you did today. For not letting him dodge. For making him face it. She said she just asked questions. No. Fanone managed a small smile. You made him answer, or try to. And that's different. You fought for us today the way we fought for this place. And that matters. Crockett's eyes were damp. It has to matter. Because if it doesn't, if accountability means nothing, if truth means nothing, if oaths mean nothing, then what are we doing? We're holding the line, Fanone said. same as we did on January 6th. That's all we can do. Hold the line and hope it's enough. They stood together on those steps, looking at the Capitol dome lit up against the night sky, the building that had been breached, damaged, defiled, but still stood. It'll be enough, Crockett said. It has to be. The Department of Justice announcement came on a Tuesday morning. A special counsel had been appointed to investigate the January 6th conspiracy. The congressional hearing, with its hours of sworn testimony and documented evidence, had provided a roadmap. No guarantees of prosecution, no promises of conviction, but an investigation. A formal criminal investigation into whether a former president had violated his oath of office and betrayed his country. It was something. Officer Michael Fanone published his book, Holding These. Officer DC Sassis. Story of January 6th and its aftermath. It became a bestseller. In it, he wrote about the hearing, about looking Trump in the eye, about what it meant to keep an oath even when others broke theirs. Officer Daniel Hodges returned to duty after months of physical therapy. His first day back, his fellow officers gave him a standing ovation. He just wanted to do his job. But he carried the memory of that hearing with him, the moment when someone finally made Trump answer. Eugene Goodman accepted the Congressional Gold Medal in a quiet ceremony. He still didn't like attention, still didn't think of himself as a hero, but he understood that symbols mattered, that showing people what courage looked like mattered, that keeping an oath mattered. Sandra Garza continued Brian Sicknick's fight. She attended every hearing, every trial, every moment of accountability. Brian couldn't speak for himself anymore, so she spoke for him. And she took comfort in knowing that at least once Trump had been forced to hear about what his actions cost. The families of officers Howard Liebengood and Jeffrey Smith established the Blue Resilience Foundation, supporting police mental health. Because surviving the attack was just the first battle, living with what happened was the second. And some officers were still fighting that battle every day. Cassidy Hutchinson became an advocate for truth-telling in government. She spoke at colleges, at civic organizations, anywhere people would listen. Her message was simple: tell the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because democracy can't survive on lies. More than 1,000 January 6th participants had been arrested, hundreds convicted, prison sentences handed down, justice delayed but not denied, each conviction another brick in the wall of accountability, and Jasmine Crockett announced her candidacy for Senate. Her campaign launch video opened with footage from the hearing, her voice asking, "Was it worth it?" Trump looking away, Officer Fanone's scars. The truth on the record, undeniable. "The truth still matters," read her campaign slogan. In her announcement speech, she said, "3 years ago, I asked a former president a question he couldn't answer. I asked if his ego was worth the lives lost, the officers injured, the democracy threatened. He couldn't say yes, but he couldn't say no either. Because saying no would mean admitting he was wrong, and he couldn't do that." She paused. "That's not leadership. That's not strength. That's cowardice. And America deserves better." The polls were close. Some loved her, some hated her, but everyone knew her name. Everyone had watched that hearing. Everyone had seen her refuse to let him off the hook. On the campaign trail, she met voters who'd been in the Capitol on January 6th, not rioters, staffers, security, the people who'd sheltered in place while the mob raged outside. They thanked her for not letting it be forgotten, for not letting it be swept away, for making truth matter. She also met Trump supporters who hated her for what she'd done, who believed she'd persecuted an innocent man, who thought the hearing was a witch hunt. She didn't argue with them, just asked them to watch it, to really watch it, to see the moments when he couldn't answer, when he looked away, when he couldn't justify the 187 minutes. Some did watch, and a few, not many, but a few, came away troubled, unsure, questioning. That was enough. That was the seed of accountability taking root. On the third anniversary of January 6th, Officer Fanone returned to the Capitol steps with Officers Hodges and Goodman. It had become a tradition, an unofficial one, but meaningful, a way to remember, to honor those who didn't make it, to remind themselves why they'd held the line. A reporter asked Fanone if the hearing had been worth it. He smiled, a real smile this time, not bitter. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I'd have said nothing would be worth it. Nothing could make up for what happened. But now, he looked at the Capitol. Now I know that truth matters. Accountability matters. Making him face what he did matters. Not because it changes everything, but because it changes something. And something is better than nothing. Do you think he'll ever be held accountable? The reporter pressed. Fanone shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. That's not up to me. What's up to me is whether I keep telling the truth, whether I keep showing up, whether I keep demanding that oaths mean something. He turned onto the camera. I will. We all will. Because that's what you do when you take an oath. You keep it. Even when, especially when, others break theirs. Beside him, Eugene Goodman nodded. No words were needed. They'd said everything that mattered on that day 3 years ago, when they'd held the line, and they'd keep holding it, because someone had to, because democracy required it, because their oaths demanded it. The American people were watching, and some of them, maybe not enough, maybe not yet, but some, were finally listening.